Welcome to this PowerPoint about types of visual rhythm. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you're going to be able to define and identify motifs and define and identify types of rhythms. It's going to first be helpful to be able to understand the difference between motif and pattern. There is an overlap between them. Motif is a single or repeated design or pattern. For example, if I repeat this to create a pattern, this is a motif. If I have a shirt with birds on it, then the birds are my motif. How it's repeated, though, is going to be described by rhythms. Pattern is what, however I repeated that particular motif, that's going to become my pattern. Obviously, there are no birds in this particular pattern, just these X's, which are again my motif. Rhythm is how the visual elements are repeated in a regular manner, with purpose, repeated with purpose. The first one may seem a little bit less with purpose. That is random. The motif is repeated in no apparent order, no regular spaces in between, no obvious placement, purpose, and color or spacing, sizes, even types of shapes. It's just random. It's again got no particular apparent order. It may be chosen with purpose, but it is not an obvious order. Repetitive, using the same motif over and over again. Alternating, switching back and forth between motifs. And progressive, gradually changing the motif. And the last one, flowing, gradually changing and then gradually changing back. So in random, again to use the bird illustration, in random the motif is repeated in no apparent order, so perhaps I've got lots of different kinds of birds, different sizes, different colors, and just kind of a smattering of them. They're just kind of all over the place. Repetitive would instead be if I took a cardinal, let's say, a cardinal and repeated it over and over and over again, perhaps in a nice straight line. That would be repetitive. If I alternate, though, let's say I change the color of my drawing of a bird, and I have a blue bird and a yellow bird and a blue bird and a yellow bird, and I keep going back and forth between those, or a cardinal and a duck, and a cardinal and a duck, and a cardinal and a duck, that's alternating. Progressive is if I gradually change something about them. So for example, if I have cardinals and they gradually change and get larger, that's progressive. Except if it gradually changes and gets larger, and then gradually changes and gets smaller, or gradually changes and the placement of them changes, so gradually higher up, and then if I stop there, then it's progressive. But if I gradually change and then I gradually lower those back down, then that's flowing. This is the one that people tend to, these are the two that people tend to confuse. Progressive gradually changes, but does not change back, and flowing gradually changes, but then does change back. Here we have some examples of these. Random. The shapes are pretty random. There's no particular order in terms of repetition there. The colors, the colors are used more than once, so they are repeated, but the placement of them and the shape of them is very random. Again, we've got fuchsia, 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 but the placement of them, the shape of them, very random. The yellow does not seem to have a particular order, but it is repeated throughout. Here we have a motif of circles, but we don't have a very regular placement of the color or of the particular shapes. Now we could say that this is progressive, perhaps smaller to gradually larger, gradually larger, gradually larger, but we're kind of reaching with that. Overall, this is very randomly placed. This particular one, we do use the diamonds over and over again, and we use the same colors throughout, but there's no particular order in the way that green is repeated or the dark blue is repeated, the light blue, the mid blue. So while we do have a motif of diamonds, the placement of the colors, the types of proportions of the diamonds, the placement of those, all very random. Repetitive is using the same motif or the same element, repeating that over and over and over again with little or no change. So here we have the obey logo repeated over and over again. So this particular one is the motif. This is the motif of this particular pattern. So we have very repetitive rhythm for this particular pattern. Again, repeating that motif over and over again. Here we have a very regular repetition of this diamond-based pattern. So again, our motif is the diamonds, and this motif, this little segment of it, is repeated over and over and over again. And then this is also, we've got a very, very gradual change from this diamond to the outer diamond within that motif, so that part would be progressive. This is very repetitive, and again repetitive with the columns. So the arches are one motif repeated, and the columns are another motif that's repeated. Alternating is taking two different elements and alternating back and forth between those. So for example, our motif here is elephants. We're going from blue to white, facing right, facing left. So alternating that, even though it's still the elephant throughout, we're alternating the direction of them and the color. This is very alternating as well, but the only thing that's changing is the direction and the placement of the brick. The brick itself is the same throughout, just the positioning has changed. And here is a more obvious alternating, fish to bird to fish to bird. So the color is alternating and the particular motif is alternating. In this progressive slide, this is the same design starting from here, going all the way down there. The only thing that's changing really is the size. It's gradually turning and gradually getting smaller until the very tight core of that little spiral. FYI, I love spirals. Here we have a picket fence, gradually changing as it goes further away from us. So again, it's progressively changing, like our numeric example there. And we're starting out very close together, getting further apart as we come out here. Larger to smaller. The flag is larger to smaller. Now you could also make an argument that the stars make it repetitive and the stripes are alternating between red and white. Or depending on how you look at it, it's actually just a repetitive red line and the white is the background. Kind of depends on how you're perceiving that, how you describe that. Flowing, we have the same tree throughout, but the tree trunk has changed. So the placement of the orangey part is flowing. So we've got higher, lower, 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 higher, 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 lower, lower. As they go further away, they do progressively get smaller, but the primary rhythm is flowing. Now here we've got kind of a combination. We've got flowing in the placement of them. So again, lower, up, down, and up again. But in terms of the color, it's more random. So very often you will see more than one rhythm type in a particular piece of artwork or in a photograph, paintings, drawings. You very often will see more than one. But here again, our motif is kayak. But the colors are randomly placed. The kayaks themselves are flowing. Here we've got a wide area, narrow area, wide, low, narrower, wider, lower, so on. So hopefully at this point, if I ask you which ones are which, you will be able to identify the different types of rhythm and identify and define what a motif is and identify a motif in a particular piece of artwork.